Having to draw shapes in Adobe Illustrator can be rather difficult using the pen tool and the pencil tool. However, in Adobe Illustrator, there's a set of tools that allow you to quickly create common shapes. To do this, let's look at our toolbox, and you can see there's a Shapes tool. If we'll click and hold on it, it'll give us a pop-out menu for different types of common shapes that we can create in Adobe Illustrator. If I was to choose the Rectangle tool, I can click and drag and quickly create rectangles using this tool. Notice that it added the 4 points automatically, and it filled and gave a stroke to whichever swatch we had created. If I was to choose the Ellipse tool, I can in one click and drag out various circles and elliptical shapes, and notice that it gives an outline until I stop clicking and let up on my mouse, and then it adds all the shapes in with that as well. Additionally, we have a rounded rectangle tool. I'm going to change colors. With the rounded rectangle tool, if I click and drag, you can see it creates a rectangle, but the corners on it are automatically rounded off. The next tool is the Polygon tool. This will allow us to create shapes that have several different sides to them. In one click, it pulls from the center outward, and you can draw different shapes. And finally, the Star tool allows us to quickly make star shapes by clicking and pulling from the center out. Now, with all these tools, there's some additional things you can do with them. Let me clear off my space and re-choose my Rectangle tool. If I was to simply click and drag, I can make any type of rectangle that I wish. But if I wanted to constrain my proportions and have a perfect square created, it can be very difficult to eyeball that. If I was to hold down my Shift key, however, while I'm dragging my mouse, you can see that my proportions are now all equal. They've snapped to equal distances. So I can only make a square by holding down my Shift key using the Rectangle tool. The same thing goes for the Circle tool, the Ellipse tool. With the ellipse, I can easily make different types of elliptical shapes, but it's very difficult to eyeball a perfect circle. So in order to constrain my proportions, I hold down my Shift key. Now when I drag my mouse, all my proportions are snapped to a circular shape, and when I release, I have a perfect circle created. With the Polygon tool, you see if I click and drag, right now I only have 6 sides to my polygon. If I hold down my Shift key, it'll constrain the proportions to keep me from being able to rotate my shape. But if I wanted to add sides to my shape, I can use the up and down arrows to add and remove sides to my shape. Right now I have 6, so I'm going to type the up arrow. Now I have 7, and as long as I keep hitting the up arrow, I can add points to my polygon. In order to remove points, just hit the down arrow. And you can see I can go all the way down to 3 sides to create different types of shapes with different sides to them. The same thing goes with the Rounded Rectangle tool. If I was to click and drag, you can see the roundedness of the corners is pretty big. But if I was to press the down arrow several times, you can see that the curve of the edges begins to get smaller and smaller. If I was to let go of it now, you can see that I have very, very small edges, whereas if I created another shape and I press the up arrow, I can control the curviness of this edge by hitting the up arrow, and now it's a lot more curved when I let go. I'm going to select them all and press delete to delete them. Let's choose another color, and let's look at our Star tool. Star tool works the same way. By default, it has 5 points to it, but if I wanted to add or remove points from my star, I can hit the up arrow and add points to a star. or I can hit the down arrow and remove points from a star. Another thing you can do if you need to create a specific sized shape is to choose the shape that you want to create. Let's work with the rectangle first. And this time, instead of clicking and dragging to create my shape, I'm just going to click once, and then I get a pop-up dialog box. From here I can type in the options for my rectangle. So if I needed a rectangle that was exactly 1 inch wide by 2 inches tall, I can type it in and hit OK, and it will create that shape right where I clicked. Same thing goes for the other tools. With an ellipse, if I was to click once, I get the width of my ellipse and the height of it. So if I wanted an ellipse that was 2 inches tall and a height of 1 1/4 inches, I can hit OK, and you can see it creates that ellipse perfectly on my artboard. Some other tools, they look like this. With the Polygon Tool, I can click once. It'll ask me for the radius, in other words, what's the distance from the center of my point moving outward to the edge, and how many sides should it have. So if I wanted a radius of 1 inch that had only 5 sides, I can hit OK, and you can see I've got a pentagon that has a radius of 1 inch. Let's delete these and get some room. Finally, look at the star tool. Same thing. With the star tool, you have an inner radius. This is the this first one is the outer radius. This is the outside points of the star. How big do you want it to go out? So let's say I wanted it to be 3 inches. And the inner radius is radius 2. This is the inside. How deep do you want the points to go in? Let's say I wanted them to go in 1/2 inch. And I want the number of points to be 6. If I hit OK, you can see I've created a star now that has an outside radius of 3 and an inside radius of 1/2 inch.